Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have another session of We Connect International Academy Learning from Women Leaders Around the World series. My name is Rachel Williams. I'm the Corporate Engagement and Project Manager at We Connect International. And I'm very happy to introduce Karen Tracey, the owner of Dunelm Business Consultants. And today she'll share with us how to develop your leadership brand and provoke your leadership self. It's going to be a great series today. And Karen comes to us with over 20 years experience in the corporate world within the learning and development area and has led many programs to help develop and engage people. Within her own business, she offers diverse coaching and leadership training and development, helping business owners, CEOs, senior executives, focusing on their strategic leadership development. I'll hand it over to Karen in just a second, but I'd like to remind all the attendees that you are currently muted. If you have any questions during the session or at the end, please write down and submit your questions in the chat box or the question and answer box, and I will read them out loud at the end of the webinar. This is a really great opportunity to learn as much as you can from a wonderfully experienced women business owner, so I encourage you to ask as many questions that come to you. So thank you, Karen, for being here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you lead the presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, and it's so fantastic to be leading this webinar this afternoon. So I'd like to thank We Connect very much, and I'd like to thank those of you who are in attendance this afternoon, because of course we're sliding nicely into the weekend, and a holiday weekend at that. So here in the UK it's 5 o'clock, so it's well and truly my weekend, so I can't think of a better way to start my weekend than spending it with you. So thank you for the invitation to do this today, and thank you for being here. So as you can see, the title or the focus of what I'm going to be talking to you about this afternoon is about your brand and your brand as leaders, and how you provoke your leadership self. And what I want to do really this afternoon is challenge or disrupt your thinking. Disrupt's a very big word at the moment, isn't it, in business? We should be disrupting as much as we can. It's all about innovation, of course, and that goes for your leadership as well. It's not just about what you're doing in your business. And so what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon is about you and about the people that you are engaging, not only on a one-to-one, but those that you're engaging in your team and what you're doing with your team, and how what you do with them affects your leadership brand. Not forgetting as well everyone else in your network. So all will become apparent as we move along, but essentially it's got 4 facets this afternoon that I'm going to be talking to you about. So, okay, Rachel, I'm trying to move my slides along, and I'm not managing to do that. So that's not a great start, is it, on my first slide? I'm pressing N for next, and I'm also clicking click, but that's not moving along. But we did test this before, so I don't know why that's starting to do that.
Is your mouse not working, or can you use your keyboard? Try to use your keyboard.
Yeah, I'm pressing N for next. Oh, we did it. We did it. Okay, something must have unlocked. So sorry about that technical problem, everyone. I hope you can see my new slide. So I think the first point I want to make to you all is standing out is important, you know, and leadership is about leaving a legacy, and leaving something that was in better shape than when you found it, or when you picked it up, and that's not easy. It's not easy for businesses, and it's not easy for individuals in businesses. So that maybe that if you're leading the business, maybe that's something you should be thinking about for your own execs and your own leaders that you are bringing on. But of course, you know, business is dynamic. We work in dynamic environments all the time, and people are challenging. they challenge us every day, and we feel that physically, don't we, as leaders? It's really, really difficult to manage performance in a positive way. So you stand out by being able to do that, and we need a great process, of course, that helps us do that, but we also need a great skill. It's an isolating place out there. So some of the things I'm going to be talking to you about this afternoon will help you stand out, and will help you feel positive about your leadership brand, because I meet a lot of people who worry about that, and who, you know, maybe have imposter syndrome. Somebody might have a question about that, which I can talk to you about later. But one of the things I'll be talking to you about this afternoon is about how you get better at standing out as a leader. And here's a few leaders that you may well know from the present, but of course some of them are very much in the past. And what I want to say about this slide is, often when I'm developing senior teams and I'm talking to them about, and maybe I'm embarking on a process of profiling them, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, I always say that this is the most important slide in the deck. And the reason I say that is often people, when they're on their leadership journey, they have preconceived ideas of what a great leader should look like and how they should act. And so sometimes they're trying to act in a way that doesn't feel comfortable to them. And that's often down to the way they're wired, and profiling helps us uncover that. But you can see from this picture, you know, these people, they're all very, very different. And I'm sure somebody like Margaret Thatcher influenced and led in a very, very different way to maybe Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela, of course. But the reason why it's the most important slide in the deck is there's no right way or there's no wrong way. It's about finding your way. And it's and that's sometimes not easy, but it's about finding a way that you feel comfortable with and you feel confident with, so that you can articulate yourself in a very, very powerful way. And when you need to articulate your vision, or you need to articulate where you're trying to go, or why you're trying to take your team, you know, that becomes very, very important. So when leading, we have to get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. And I'm sure, as absolutely I do, when you're in a leadership position and when you're in a dynamic environment, you're often coming up with challenges all the time. And great leaders are the ones that recognize that discomfort and know that nothing bad's going to happen. They're going to feel challenged, but they're going to come out the other end. So if you can recognize that you're going into a process that, you know, maybe you're standing up in front of a lot of people, or maybe you're going to be delivering a very, very difficult message, embrace that discomfort. You know, it's probably adrenaline, and adrenaline is your friend, especially when I'm coaching people to stand up in front of people. They often say, well, I get so nervous and I feel so awful. Well, that's often adrenaline. And if you've not got adrenaline, complacency can set in. And when complacency sets in those situations, that's when the wheels can come off. So don't worry about that. You know, get comfortable feeling comfortable. And often, you know, when we're in senior leadership positions, if it feels okay and it feels very calm and it feels very normal all the time, then the question I would be asking you as a coach is, you know, what are you disrupting? What are you challenging? What are you changing? So I hope that sort of set the presentation up for the 4 facets that I want to talk to you about this afternoon. So a quick fire overview of the 4 elements of my brand, and I'm going to look at each of them in turn this afternoon. But I'm going to be talking about how you act and what your preferences are as a leader. I'm going to be talking about how you determine and work out and develop how you behave. And our behaviour is driven from our value system. I'm going to be talking to you about how you can develop your thinking around that. I'm also going to be talking to you about how you unlock potential, because that's a really, really important part of how we develop our leadership brand. Because we don't achieve these things on our own, we require our team around us. So I'm going to be touching on performance management, and I'm going to be touching on how you unlock potential around you. And I'm also going to be talking about influence. And if people say to me as a leadership coach, what's the most important thing that a leader has to nail or get right? Well, the top two important things are how you influence, in my head, are how you influence and how you unlock potential around people. For the people that are around you. Of course, it's important that we're great at all the other nuts and bolts things, such as finance and marketing and all the other things in our businesses. But if we're great influencers and we can unlock potential of those around us, we are going to get to our destination a whole lot faster and in a whole lot better shape. And how we act and how we behave around people, our peers and our team members and our customers and our stakeholders and everybody else in our network, they're the important things. And the fact that you're here this afternoon tells me that, you know, you've already started to think about that. And that's really fantastic, because you know what? If you change nothing, nothing changes. And I'm really, really privileged to work with some amazing people. And, you know, what's great about them is that if they've invited me into their business, they've made that decision. So I very rarely come in contact with people who aren't ready to make a change, because if they're not ready, I'm not going to be there. So you clearly are, and that sets you apart already. So well done. And it's really, really easy to stay the same, you know, but growing businesses and dynamic businesses need growing leaders, and standing still is not going to get us to where we want to go. So let's talk about this first part, or one of the first facets. And I've got a quick exercise for you. And if you're in front of your PC and you've got a pen and paper, that would be really good. But if you haven't, don't worry, you can do this in your head. And what I'd like to do is I want to ask you a question. And I want to ask you a question about who are your heroes? Who are the people that you look up to? You know, often when I ask people this question, and I'd love to be looking in the whites of all your eyes this afternoon, but unfortunately I can't see you. But I imagine you're already starting to think about that. And I'd like to ask you who you look up to, who inspires you. When I ask people this question, sometimes I get a lot of fathers and I get a lot of mothers. I also get a lot of previous bosses. People say, oh, my ex-boss or my first boss or whatever. And if you've got a pen and paper, I want you to write their name down. And then after you've done that, I want you to write down their traits. So hopefully you're starting to do that. It's funny, you know, when people do this exercise, they'll often write something down, and they'll say, and they'll write traits such as, oh, this person always tells me the truth, or the reason I look up to them is because they never let me down, or the reason I look up to them is they were always there for me when I was in a situation. So hopefully in front of you, written on your pad, are a set of traits. And if they're not on your pad, maybe they're in your head. Now, what's important about these things that you've written down is how they actually come from you. And what I mean by that is the reason that you've written them down is because there is a synergy between these and your values, your own values. And if I was in front of you now and I would ask you to read them out, and if you said, you know, oh, well, this person never let me down, or this person was always there for me, what I'd be saying to you now is, you know what I know about you is you will never let anyone down. What I know about you is you are always there for people. And people are amazed by what they write and what they recognize. And when I do this as a group scenario, often people will hear their colleagues read those traits and they will recognize those traits in them. So maybe this is an exercise that you can do with some of your some of your own teams. And although I'm not speaking to you now, it'd be good to hear from you at the end whether you recognise those things and those traits, either in your head or on your pad, as your own value system. But, you know, values are really, really important. They drive how we behave. And a very eminent colleague of mine once said to me about values, when you're in a room and you feel really great because something's happening around you that you like, you're observing it, and it's making you feel warm and it's making you feel really positive. What's happening is one of your values is being nurtured. And on the other side of it, if you're in a room and you're observing a situation and you're observing something that's making you feel very uncomfortable, and you almost want to put your hand in front of your eyes because you just don't want to watch it. What's happening is one of your values is being compromised. So you might want to think about those situations when you're really, really feeling really good, or you're really, really feeling really, really uncomfortable, because they are real indicators of what your values are and what is important to you. And you need to translate that into your leadership. And the leaders that I meet struggle sometimes when they're talking about values, when they're talking about personal values, and they're talking about company values, to really come up with a set of values that are real for them. It's easy to write integrity, it's easy to write respect, it's easy to write any number of things, but really where the powerful ones are the ones that you really recognise and that translate into your leadership and into your communication and into your interaction with your people every day. So they need to translate into your leadership, and they need to translate into what you expect and accept from others. And being clear about those values, properly clear about those values, will make for a better environment and will make for a much more functional and effective working relationship between you and your team. So I hope that small a bit of information around values has been thought-provoking for you. So the next thing I want to talk about is your wiring. And when I talk to people about this, we always have, you know, quite a joke about, you know, they have, because I always say I'd like to look under the bonnet, you know, and the idea that I'd lift the bonnet and see a lot of wiring. But of course, what I'm really talking about is what makes you tick, and how I do this personally is by using a psychometric assessment called DISC. Now, you may well have seen DISC, you may not have, you may have used another psychometric assessment such as MBTI. There's a number out there, but essentially what they do is they help us understand how we are wired, how we approach things, and what our preferences are, what our communication preferences are, and what our leadership preferences are. And I often ask the question, you know, how should you treat people? And I always question that because it's really, really important. And often people will say to me, well, I treat people how I would like to be treated. And I'm sure there's people on this webinar now that would say, well, yeah, that sounds okay. But I would challenge that. And what understanding your wiring helps you do is the reverse of that. It helps you understand how you should treat people, because we shouldn't be treating people how we would like to be treated. We should be treating people how they would like to be treated. So again, if you've got a pad, it's quite a challenge doing an interactive session when you can't see people, but I'm hoping you're joining in with me out there. And just draw a circle on your pad for me and put a cross in the middle, you know, quarter it out like that. And then maybe add in the word extrovert and introvert. And then add in whether you're task focused or you're people focused. 2 questions for you. Now, what I'd like you to do is to ask yourself that question. It's go with your gut. Say, and if you think you are an extrovert and you're people focused, maybe put a cross in that top right hand cheese shape. if those of you who played Trivial Pursuit would know what I mean by that. Or if you think you're an introvert, task-focused person, you might put that in this bottom left chunk of that circle. It's 2 questions. So if you weren't profiling somebody using the DISC, you could ask them those 2 questions, and that would give you a rough idea about where they are. Oops. And essentially, if you are a people-focused extrovert, as actually I am, you are a high I, or you are an I indicator on the DISC. If you are a task-focused introvert, then you are a C. Now, do you remember that slide I showed you back at the beginning of the deck that said it was the most important slide in the deck? All of those people, whether it was John F. Kennedy or whether it was Gandhi, they were all from different elements of this DISC. And there's not a right quadrant or a wrong quadrant. They're all different, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can still be a great leader. You know, somebody like Mark Zuckerberg was probably a task-focused introvert, a C, but somebody like John F. Kennedy was probably a people-focused extrovert, high I. It doesn't mean one of them is better than others, but what it means is they have a different approach to their communication and to their leadership. So, well, that's all well and good, but what do we do with this? Well, if then we can determine where we are on something like this, on an instrument like this, and then I can give you the characteristics as a general for each of those profiles, then we have more chance, let's go back to right at the beginning of this slide, of treating them how they would like to be treated. As an example of that is, if I have a difficult conversation to be had, and I'm gonna have to talk about poor performance, I may approach that in a very, very different way to a high D, a task-focused extrovert, than I would with a people-focused introvert, a high S, because they're wired and they behave in a different way. So here they are. Here's an overview for you. So the Ds are very direct. They're very decisive. They're very strong word. They're pioneers. They love a challenge. Sometimes, because they've all got strengths and weaknesses, they're aggressive at the extreme end. But that doesn't mean to say if you're a D, you're aggressive. It's just sometimes at the extreme end, there can be aggressive tendencies. They like immediate results. They're very fast-paced. They're extroverts. They're very confident and they have very high expectations of themselves. They like personal power and they love control of that wheel. They love being in control of the driving seat, and they like interdependence and they want action. All of these profiles have a fear, and Ds fear failure. They do not do failure. Now, I'm reading all of those characteristics out. I'm sure you can all see a D in your mind's eye, or you know a D in your business, or you know a D in your family. They stick out. They stick out, the Ds. Now, oops. Rachel, I'm just struggling with my slides again. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that delay there. So here are the Is. The Is are influencers. They're great communicators. They're quite chatty, great networkers. They love a room of 200 people. Love the idea of walking into a room with all of those people to talk to. They tend to be quite tactile, and they focus on the person, and they're very friendly and talkative. These, remember, are the people-orientated extroverts. They're very team and relationship focused, and they're very democratic and collaborative. Sometimes, though, they can be a bit impulsive or disorganized, and they're not always great finishers. They lack a bit of follow-through. And they like recognition and popularity. They love winning an award or getting a shield for something. And they like freedom of expression, and they enjoy status symbols. Now, because of their people orientation and their extrovert tendencies, they don't like rejection. Now let's just stop this process for a while, and just think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about you developing your leadership brand, and we're talking about you really provoking your leadership self, and we're talking about you treating people how they want to be treated. So what does this do? Well, what this helps us do is think about, you know, where we might put those people. So if you think about a high I, we're not going to put a high I in our business in a role, or they're not going to be successful in a role where they have limited people interaction. What we need to do as leaders, as we develop, you know, our brand and how we decide we're going to be around people and how we're going to influence and unlock their potential, is we need to understand how they are wired. So that's why this is really, really important. We understand where they are on something like the DISC. So let's continue. So here are the S's. Here are the people-focused introverts. They're very solid, they're very dependable, and they will never rock the boat. Now, if we've got people who are in leadership positions who are S profile, they may find it sometimes hard to performance manage, but they have a very high team health awareness, very people orientated, as I said, and very loyal. And they are the reliable colleague, and S will never let you down, but they love the status quo. So the challenges with S is, if you are leading an S and you're in a dynamic business and you want to make continuous change, they're going to have real issues if all of a sudden you want to make an unplanned change. As you can see at the bottom, they really fear that unplanned change. So you know, again, know who your S's are in your business, and know how you should be developing them, and know which is the best role for them in the business. And finally, here are the C's. Here are the C's, and they're very task focused, and they are quite introvert. They're very precise and analytical, and they can be quite sensitive. These people focus on the facts and the detail, something that a high I potentially wouldn't do. And they challenge all aspects of a plan. They're the ones, when you say to a meeting, we want to do this and we want to do this, they'll say, well, hang on, legally we can't because we need to do that. Legally we can't because we need to do that. A lot of FDs and HRDs that I coach are often this C profile, whereas a lot of the sales directors are often in the D or the I profile. They're all very different. But sometimes they can overanalyze and be a little bit overcritical, kind of see, and they might isolate themselves. But they love opportunities to gain knowledge and demonstrate their skills, and they like stability and correctness. But they don't like criticism. So, you know, sometimes when we have to pick up a C when they've got some problems, we have to be very, very clear about how we have that difficult conversation with them, because criticism is a big fear of them. So I hope when you look at those 4 profiles, you can start to see how in your own businesses, and, you know, and in your own personal lives, where people are starting to fit, but more importantly, where you fit, and how you develop yourself and your brand as a leader based on the characteristics and the things that you're good at and the fears that you may have. Now, I love this quote, you know, leaders that don't listen are eventually surrounded by people who have nothing to say. And I have another saying that says, you know, sometimes I meet leaders that are stuck on transmit, you know, that they're trying to get done in their businesses. They're trying to create this change, but they're not asking those different types of people with those different types of wiring what they want and how they're going to solve their problems. And what happens then is, if they're stuck on transmit and they're in direct mode the whole time, and they're not having the right conversation in the right way with the right style, what happens is they just end up telling people and directing people with what they think they should do. What that drives, though, the problem to that is lack of ownership. So when I hear leaders say to me, you know, the problem I've got in the business is people don't make decisions and they don't take ownership. Well, I always push that back onto the person that's leading that business, because there's a reason for that. And often they're not listening enough and they're not asking enough questions to drive that person with that type of profile, how they feel that they should move forward and how they should solve those problems. We should stop telling people what we think the answer is, and we should start asking them and listening to them, their views based on their preferences, based on their wiring, how they think that should be done. And what's that essentially? Well, that's a good coaching methodology, but that's perhaps another session. So there's 2 parts of my 4 parts this afternoon. We've talked about values and how we behave, and we've talked about preferences and how you might use something like a psychometric tool to help you understand. Now, you know, that doesn't mean to say that has to be expensive. Sometimes you can use online tools out there that are free to help you do that. But, you know, I've given you a quick one this afternoon. Ask the person 2 questions. Are they introvert or the extrovert? Are they task or they people? You've got a few characteristics there based on one of those 4 profiles, and I hope that helps you do that. So, moving on, the long and short of it is that the level of your success as a leader is dependent on the skill of the people that are around you, which is why, you know, the 3rd element is around unlocking the potential of others. And, you know, what we're talking about now is performance management. And my experience is that you need 2 things to have great performance management in a business. And that is, you need a great process, that people can follow, because, you know, if people don't know what they need to do in terms of managing performance and when, then they're just not going to know. But you can have the best process for performance management in the world, but if you have not developed the skill of how you performance manage in a business with your leaders, then it will go wrong. And often I'll ask people what they think performance management is, and often they'll say it's when you are managing performance when people are not performing, but that's only part of it. Now, I'm going to put a slide up now which has a lot of information on it, and I don't want you to worry about it, but I really want to use it, because what it does, it gives you a full picture. You're probably all reeling now at the amount of information that's on this slide, but I don't want you to worry about it. But essentially, it's 3 things. If you look to the left at the top, a business needs a strategy. Move to the right. It then needs a process by which that strategy can be realized. And if that process is taking place, it should give out some data about your people that you can review. And that's what this is. So at the front end, you know, you've got a vision, a mission, a structure, some strategic and business goals. And then all of those boxes in the middle, I'm sure you've got in your businesses, you know, KPIs and job description and recruitment to selection. But the most important box, the heart of that process, is right in the middle: regular and continuous performance measurement. So mostly comes out in the form of monthly one-to-ones. Now, if they are taking place, fabulous. So I mentioned you needed 2 things. You need a process. Wonderful. There's a process. I'm sure you've all got a monthly one-to-one process, or a review process, whatever you call it. But you can do more harm than good if the people that are doing that are not skilled and trained to be able to do it. You can actually do more harm than good. All of those things in that process actually give out a set of performance results, and they can be used for reward or succession planning, feeding into your training strategy, whatever. Essentially, though, what you've got here is a performance management cycle, and I developed this cycle over 20 years ago, the first part of it, with what was my colleague then, who was a HR director in a training business that I was working in. And actually, it's not changed that much. And most of the business I go into, I share this with, they all get it. And what most of them say to me is, we've got most of those boxes. Some of them we haven't. Some of the boxes we've got are not fit for purpose. But what we do know is there's a lot of those boxes where we need to train our people in being better at them. So what's all this got to do with your brand? Well, as I mentioned to you before, you know, our success is only realized if people around us are realizing their potential, and leaders are required. It's your job, it's your mission to unlock the potential of others. What I'm saying is, this is the process by which you can achieve that. But how you do it, right from the top, from where you are, and how you develop your leaders in your business, that's the development of the skill, and one has to go in hand with the other. I just want to share with you a couple of other models that you may well have seen before. One of them was by Jack Welch from GE, and another one was by Max Langsberg. And what Jack Welch said was, if you took a set of people and you measured them between 1 and 10 based on their values and based on their performance, what you get, if somebody was 10, they exhibited fabulous values and they were brilliant performers, they were A players. I guess some of you will have seen this before, right? If they're high value but maybe low performers, or low value, high performers, they're B players. And of course, low value, low performance, C players. But what do you do with that? Well, first of all, unless you've got an effective performance management system, the slide before, you're not going to be in a position to determine where your people are. But of course, here's some responses to that. Coaching for somebody who's low value, high performance, training, low performance but high values. But we forget sometimes, you know, the A players, because they're doing brilliantly, we leave them alone. Well, the mark of you as a leader and the mark of your brand will not only be to unlock the potential of those who are struggling, but even more importantly, highlight your stars and highlight your fast trackers, so that they can be, you know, even better leaders than they already are, or even better players than they already are. And having a great leader with a great brand are the ones that do not stick their head in the sand when we've got somebody who is a C player. Too many times we let people, because we let people carry on underperforming because we don't have the skills, or we don't decide we need to develop the skills, or we don't develop the skills in our teams that work for us to manage poor performance. And that can be so debilitating for a team, and it can be hugely debilitating on an organisation. I promised you 2 models. This is the Max Langsberg model, which is the skill will matrix, a very, very similar thing, where here we're measuring skills, well, similar to performance, I suppose, and motivation, and the response that we should give in those cases. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it, with somebody with high motivation but low skills, that we support and train them. But let's not forget those A and C players. Everybody should be fitting in a box. And of course, that's dynamic. Somebody might be an A player this week, but we're promoting them to another role next week. That could easily send them into a B or even a C position. So it's not good enough to have a label and be stuck with that. It's a constant evaluatory process. So yeah, surround by skill. Make sure we've got the right procedures, monitoring, maybe make them a super user. So fail to performance manage at your peril, because true leaders get people from where they are to where they have not been. And that is the third part of my Venn diagram there. You know, how you unlock potential is part of your brand. It's part of who you are, and we will not achieve all of the things in our business. We will not achieve all of the things personally if we are not truly managing the people properly around us. So what's the final part then? Well, we're nearly at the end. Well, if you remember, the big 2 things for me is from a leadership perspective is around influencing, and it's also it's about unlocking potential, but it's also about Influencing, and that's what I want to talk about next, and how you influence and how you develop your network and your profile. Now, one of the first things I do when I'm with a team of leaders, and I love doing, and this is in a group, is the short exercise with them, and I get them to draw. You might want to do this now, or you might just want to have a think about this and do it later on. They get them to draw 3 circles, and then I get them to write inner circle, close network, and outer network. Now, it's subjective. My view of what my inner circle is might be very, very different to what Rachel's view of her inner circle is. That's okay. It's not prescriptive. It is subjective. So the purpose of this is for you to map what you think your network is, and then I give them an idea of what might be mapped in that by the arcs. So let's sort of chunk out, if you like, who's in our network. So we might have in our network, we might have peers, we might have team members, we might have people who work for us, we might have mentors, we might have employees, we might even have customers or industry experts, whoever it is. Again, that is very, very personal. If I was to give this model to people I was working with, it would just have the 3 rings. That's it. Every single network map, which is what this is, I see is very, very different. What I do, once they've written what they want their arcs to be, get them to write them down along the edge. So you might want to do that when you're over here in your holiday weekend, while you're thinking about how you develop your network this weekend. And then I get them to map them. An example of this is just initials. This is a made-up version, just as an example here. What's the purpose of this? Well, the purpose of this is to see who is around you. And it's easy to see here where the gaps are. So, for example, in this particular one, this person's got a coach in their inner network, but they may determine that they need more coaches around them. So the conclusion they might come to is, well, I need to do more work by bringing those people in. You may, for example, looking at that peer one, you may say, well, okay, most of my peers are on my out and out network, and I'm not really close to them, and I really need to be. And actually, you may make some reverse decisions, because you may have people that are close to you that are toxic and that are not in line with who you are, either in terms of your value system, or where you're taking your business, or where you're taking your department. And you may, as a result of looking at this, make a decision to reverse where they are on this network map. There may be some reasons why they are there. So you may need to make some decisions of how you improve that, and how you inject something into the communication strategy with those people. Any amount of decisions can be made by using such a network map as this, and I've seen them used very, very powerfully. So I hope you find this useful. And most of the execs that I work with use this, and they love it. And they're all incredibly different, and they love sharing it with each other. This might be a great exercise for you to do if you've got a team of people yourself. A brilliant model to use for people who are in sales, or who are in roles that require really the interaction with lots of different people, especially on the outside, because this isn't just an inner network map. It's a map. It's for your external network as well. You can use it however you want. But why is understanding your network important? Why is having an effective picture of your network important? Well, because without understanding that, and without having a great network in place, we can't influence. We can't influence to the impact that is important, because influence occurs when a person's opinions, actions, and behaviour is affected by others. We can't have a maximum effect on this if we don't have the right people around us in our network in the first place. So a body of work needs to do that. So I've been talking for 45 minutes, so I'm going to start to close my session now, because I've talked about my 4 areas. So I'd like to leave you with some closing thoughts, because I think Rachel said that we might have some time for some questions. So successful professionals in developing their brand, are learning something at that moment and challenging their own thinking. And successful professionals are of the firm belief that they do have weaknesses, and they are using some of the models, or they are doing some of the thinking that we've talked about today to actually get to the bottom of that. And in provoking their leadership self, which I hope I've helped you do this afternoon, they don't compromise their values, and they know how these values link to their behaviours, and they know how the people around them, their values link to their behaviours too. And they challenge that poor behaviour around them, and they meet it head on, but they do it in a way that works for them and is taking into consideration their wiring. Successful professionals are loyal and effective with all of their workforce, and even if they're not similar to them. And that's a brilliant thing that comes out of profiling, because people start to see that I'm very, very different to you, or you're very, very different to me, but hey, we're both great and we're both effective. And they're loyal when people are underperforming, and they're loyal and kind and effective when they don't like or rate them. That's a powerful statement, right? Sometimes we're surrounded by people that we don't get, and we don't rate sometimes. And from a human perspective, we can't help it. We might not like them. We have to get over that. Leadership is not about absorbing that feeling, and it's about being consistent with everybody in any regard. And successful professionals put their money where their mouth is in developing others, and take the time to ensure that they see other people's talent as a desirable, not a threat. And of course, finally, successful professionals have a growing and dynamic network of support. They know who is around them, they're developing that all the time, and they make it their business to do that. Thank you so much for listening to me this afternoon. It's been an absolute blast. I hope I've started you off to an exciting and dynamic weekend. I'm going to hand over to Rachel now, who I think might have some questions for me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Karen. We certainly appreciate your time and your input and your energy. I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to learn more about how to transform your business. And so I think that the first question is, how can today's listeners take what they've heard from you today and use it to motivate their team, and how can they set an example for their team? What are some takeaways you think would be important for them to share?
Sorry, what was that last bit? What was what?
What are some takeaways, something that they use in their teams?
Okay, well, you talked about motivating the team. It's probably one of the most common questions I get. Well, people, I think we have to look at it the other way, and we have to understand what is demotivating our team, and often the thing that I write on a flip chart when somebody asks me this question is two words: symptom and cause. And what we see is we see symptoms of demotivation. So people are maybe, I don't know, they are quiet, or they're monosyllabic, or they don't join in. They are symptoms of something. And what I ask leaders to do is to say, okay, what's driving that? What is causing that? And sometimes it's the leader themselves, because sometimes they're either shutting down dialogue, or they're not asking enough great questions, or they're micromanaging because they're expecting people to do something in their way and not in their own way.
Wow, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it that way. So that leads me to wonder, so what are some other common challenges that leaders face today? What do you find are the common queries or questions or issues that people in leadership position often come to you for?
I get a lot of leaders coming to me with challenges around performance management, and lots of people find it difficult to manage poor performance. And so if we think about those four profiles and some of the traps we can fall into, where sometimes the trap a high D profile, for example, a task-orientated introvert falls into, is they get very aggressive, when there's poor performance, they fall into a state what I call tell. There's no question. You will do this, and you'll do it by then. This is not right. And if we think about our values, how we communicate to someone, you can give a very, very difficult message to someone, but still say it respectfully and kindly, and in a two-way fashion. So people fall into some big traps and find it very, very difficult when they're performance managing and they're having that challenging discussion in a same situation, but in a different challenge. Someone like a high S who's a people orientated introvert, that they find that situation difficult, because the idea that they've got to tell someone that they've done something wrong, they just do not do confrontation. They do the idea that they've got to tell someone that they are not performing, and so they stick their head in their sand, or they avoid it, or they fall into a passive mode where it's all about the other person, and they can't get themselves into an assertive dialogue. And it all goes pear-shaped. So the biggest and the most common challenges, to answer your question, I find are around that, and around people effectively managing performance in line with the preferences, the communication preferences of the people that work for them, and in line with their values, so they're not compromising those.
Wow, that's very interesting. I would think that maybe it would cause then people to think about how they interact with maybe potential employees and during the hiring process, to maybe suss out how collaborative they might be in terms of working on the mission together and things of that nature. Like if it goes all the way back to the hiring part, I imagine it does.
Absolutely. And if we can work out what a role, what you know, when we're hiring, we obviously need to know what skills and knowledge those people need, but we also should take that a stage further and say, okay, we need to know what skills and knowledge they need, but we also need to know what behaviours they need to exhibit. And if this person is going into a scenario where they're going to require a lot of people interaction, a lot of communication, and a lot of group work, then that is going to be absolutely right for a certain type of profile. And if you can work that out and you can hire around that and question around that at the beginning, you're more likely to have a more effective appointment in your business.
That's very insightful advice. I appreciate that. And if anyone else wants to ask a question of Karen, we do have the chat box and question box available. We only have a couple more minutes remaining left in our webinar session today. But you see here that Karen has been so kind and gracious as to include her contact information. If there are, further insights or questions that you need help with. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, that this is being recorded and will be put on the We Connect International YouTube page. So you'll be able to go back and access this again if need be. So feel free to utilize both resources of reviewing this presentation again and reaching out to Karen directly. I know it's been a really great session full of lots of information, so maybe you don't have questions immediately, but if they come to you later, that might happen. So I'm just checking if there are any other further questions. If not, I will thank Karen so much for your time. This has been such a great way to spend our Friday. So thank you for your time. I hope that it brings you into your weekend with lots of thoughts and ways to transform how you lead. So thank you again, Karen, for your insights, and thank you everyone for joining us. We are glad you were able to listen in on today's session. So thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everyone for dialing in. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everyone.